My name is Ján Lalka, and I work as a forensic investigator. And now I'd like to give a presentation that relates to the dark side of the insolvency or insolvent companies. And I'll be speaking about the stripping of assets from these companies and about how to prevent, reduce such behavior, and how to implement a system of prevention and system of monitoring in order to reduce such behavior. At first, apart from the general description based on tens of projects that we worked on, based on the companies that were insolvent, and to show, based on these examples, to show how the assets are stripped and how these asset stripping is disguised. And then I'd like to show you some instruments and tools that can be used either by creditors or insolvency administrator. When speaking about the companies in crisis, we can say that it is a certain incubator of the crime, because if the owners decide to declare bankruptcy and to strip the assets from the company, they commit a lot of criminal offenses. So these are crimes that occur quite often in relation to default. It is not just one criminal offense, but it is a wide range of criminal acts. Today, I'd like to focus on the siphoning away of funds, or stripping of funds, or hiding of the assets. There are various terms meaning the same. So now let's have a look at the situation. It is quite complicated to imagine what is happening in relation to defaults. These are actually stories of companies where not often there are plaintiffs. So if you are not well acquainted with the situation of the company, you cannot file a lawsuit. So then the situation is not covered in the media, and it's very difficult to find out what criminal acts are being committed. Now, I'd like to show you some statistical data. I don't know whether you can see it there. This is based on the police statistics until 2016. We can see the average damage amount caused by the crimes investigated by the police. So over the recent period, it's about 5 or 4 million crowns per case. So these are this is damage that is much lower than identified by us when we are helping to identify the damage related to the stripping of assets. These are many times higher. But it's very often to investigate these cases. There are two more graphs that shows the number of such crimes related to defaults, and we can see that over the recent period is quite stable, or it is slightly decreasing, which I don't think it's the reality, because we know about tons of cases of criminal activity based on which a lawsuit could be filed. So there is a decisive moment. Decisive moment is the actual default of the company. It is important to set this moment with the methods of financial analysis, and then based on that, we find out that from that particular moment, the company is not able to pay their obligations that come due. And it is also a psychological moment when the owners decide that they are not able to continue running the company and they want to declare the bankruptcy. So this to set this particular moment, this decisive date, it's important to set it because this is moment as of which the companies start to think about how to strip the assets from the company. They are looking for the methods how to do it in an efficient manner with the help of various consultants. Now let's have a look at various stages of the asset stripping. So at first the company has some problems. It decides to stop the activity, and they start to look for the possibilities how to strip the assets. So they search for experts, consultants that help them to do it in a legally acceptable way, prepare the network of SPVs, or some shell companies that help to implement these transactions, and they also use a related person for stripping these assets. Then it is necessary to make another step to find the way how to disguise this asset stripping. It means to backdate transactions or to start to falsify data in the accounting system, or to create a completely new documents and then to dispose of these evidence. So when the insolvency proceedings is open, to lose the documentation, to delete the disks, or to destroy the computers. So these are things or activities that are quite common. So the purpose is to not to enable further investigation. Now, regarding the areas, we could speak about that for hours, but just briefly. So it is at first necessary to divide the assets into assets and liabilities. So on part of assets, this is a purchase of software that is not needed, or a purchase of technologies for an excessive price, technologies that are not needed, then sale for unfavorable conditions to related persons, or the purchase of real estate properties that are fictitious, that are based on the proceeds that never occurred, but for which the company paid a lot of money so that they could acquire such projects. But then a few months later, it turned out that the project was not realistic and that this investment needed to be written off. Then it is also method of preparation for the companies that the debtor will be in default even a year before the opening of the insolvency proceedings. This is done in cooperation with the related persons with which the relation is not visible. Then, of course, after the proceedings, the business comes back to the company from the shell company, for example, and then it is providing loans without consideration or for minimum consideration. Then, regarding the current assets, there are sets of various transactions, assignment of receivables for a very low price. Then various debts that are claimed non-collectible or outstanding debts, but in reality it's not true. Then payment of advances to associates, and the associates do not return the advances, so providing the fictitious loans. So now we are getting to liabilities. I already said that a large part of loans that get to the company are often identified as fictitious. Those are the loans that don't go through the bank account, which is quite suspicious. It's always suspicious if it's not through the wire transfer. On the part of cost and revenues, there's also a host of schemes. I can choose some of them as an example. For example, purchase of services of various types without consideration, PR, marketing services, legal services, IT services. It's very difficult to prove that the company received consideration or not. Then investments into leases or rentals. So the company, for example, pays for lease for like 20 years in advance, even though they declare a default in a year's time. Then drawing loans for unfavorable conditions with a favorable interest rate, or also payments of fictitious penalties. This is quite common that, for example, building companies agree with their business partner and they enter into an agreement that is very difficult to perform thereunder. For example, if you don't build that house within a week or 2 months' time, then you have to pay a high penalty. So the company, even though it is in a difficult situation, then they pay the contractual penalty to that business partner, and based on a hidden agreement that after some time the contractual penalty will be returned. So there is quite a high number of various acts on the part of revenues. There are some other you can see on the slide. So it's done, for example, by providing the clients great discounts, and these discounts or high margins are then restituted. And it is stripped to new companies, shell companies, or special purpose vehicles, and this SPV, the only property or the only asset they have is the client's base, a database. So it can also be the rental of the assets for a minimum consideration, for example, that the debtor purchases a building or a machine, and then for just a fraction of that they rent the premises to a third party. Now, regarding disguising of these transactions, we can see that the majority of these transactions is done 6 to 9 months before the opening of the insolvency proceedings, or there are certain cases when it is done more than 1 year before, if they prepared themselves for such a situation carefully. Regarding the parties, we can see the related persons, so it's very important to identify related persons, so that it would be possible to assess whether the relationship was not unfavorable for the debtor. Then the use of front persons or dormant companies. It means the companies that exist, they have a long history. They were not established before the commencement of the insolvency proceedings, and these companies then sell transactions to the debtor. Then there are various strange investment companies that provide financing, provide funds just a few weeks before the insolvency proceedings. It means the property that has not been distrained happen. And then also insolvency specialists, various lawyers, law firms, consulting companies, auditing or valuation companies, some public notaries, and so on. Now, regarding documentation, the purpose is to reduce the availability of the documents that could compromise these efforts. So there are attempts to backdate the transactions and to destroy as many documents as possible. We could also see the changes in the accounting system just a few weeks before the default, and also the destruction of the software, which almost makes it almost impossible to identify the relevant data. So also grouping of the accounts, so it's very difficult to search for the details, and so it is quite a sophisticated procedure. And regarding the transactions, these are sophisticated structures of transactions that are very difficult to identify. They are actually spread across the whole bookkeeping system. It's very well-prepared legal documents without any mistakes, prepared by experts, by lawyers. There are very complicated and unclear conditions for the performance, for example, options. So then again, it's very difficult to identify what is behind. There are very vague definitions, easily contestable. So this is the trend, how this has been done recently. It needs to look like a standard business which was not successful, which failed for some external reasons. Now a few examples. What we can see here on this chart is the development of cash transactions. The last line is the moment of filing the insolvency petition. And on the horizontal axis, we can see the dates, and on the vertical is the amount of cash transactions. Under the axis, these are the funds taken from the cash, and so we can see that there is a really big activity just before the filing of the insolvency petition. Now, let's have a look at the development of receivables or claims. So the blue lines shows the development of the receivables that are not due, and then we have other receivables and their due date within 30 days or over 30 days or over 90 days. And again, you can see an increased activity just before the filing of the insolvency petition. So we can also see trends from this chart. On the other hand, if we compare it with liabilities, again, a very slump decrease just before the filing. There probably some set-offs were done just before the insolvency petition. Another chart shows the sale of goods. We can see how it decreases, how the profitability of the sale decreases just before the insolvency petition. So we can see that the other parties were buying the goods at that time for a very low margin. So it shows the trend quite clearly. And the last chart shows the set-offs. At first sight, we can see that something is wrong. The last month before the insolvency petition filing, the activity again increased. So these are data from the actual insolvencies. I said that it's very important to identify the business partners. So this is what it looks like when we make a graph of the company, and we can see the activity before the filing of the insolvency petition, and we can see there is a host of various companies and persons related to the person of the death. If there are insolvency practitioners or administrators, it might be interesting to see the following. What to do if they actually come to an almost empty office without any software, without any computers, but there are still some modern sources, and one of the sources is to get the data directly from the bank, to get the data from flash drives, from old computers with backup copies of accounting programs or personal computers of employees who are not there anymore. So it is possible to recover this data and use it for the analysis. Then analysis from the public sources. These are freely available tools. And then verification of the other parties in the public sources. We have quite vast possibilities of public sources. Then e-discovery, this is a recovery of the deleted disks and searching for documents, correspondence, or evidence in an electronic form, and try to recover the accounting from the available documents. And now to recap the recommendations based on our activity. I think at first it is necessary to identify the schemes, to recognize what is actually going on, and of course, at first sight, it is very, very, very complicated to identify what's going on. But if we are able to dig deep down, then it's much better for us and better for those who invented these. Yes, this structure, then to make the model of detection of the moment of default of the debtor more efficient, and to ensure a detailed monitoring. Currently, we have a great amount of publicly available data that can be used, for example, some annual closings and some other documents that may show some signals that something wrong is going on. Then identify related persons or affiliated persons and follow the money. It means that the accounting system is not reliable. It's very often falsified, and so it's necessary to focus on the actually banking transactions. Then also education in the field of detecting the schemes of sophisticated financial crime, and to medialize, and so media coverage is very important, and the education of the professional public is also very important. We still don't, I mean, the public does not have the statistics, know-how, schemes and tools available, so it's important to inform them and to raise their awareness.